Deep within the exclusion zone, surrounded by a dense, overgrown forest that has reclaimed the land, lies one of the most terrifying places on Earth. It is not a mass grave of human bodies, but a graveyard of giants. Row upon row of trucks, helicopters, armored personnel carriers, and bulldozers sit in eerie silence. Their paint is peeling, their tires are flat, and moss covers their cold steel skeletons. To the untrained eye, this looks like a simple scrapyard, a collection of old junk left to rot by a collapsed empire. But this is a deception. These machines are not just scrap. They are the highly radioactive corpses of a mechanical army. Some of these vehicles are so contaminated that standing next to them for an hour would deliver a lethal dose of radiation. They are the silent veterans of the Battle of Chernobyl, the mechanical heroes that were sent into a hell where no human could survive, only to be left here, imprisoned forever in a toxic purgatory. This is the story of the Suicide Squad of machines. To understand why this graveyard exists, we must go back to April 1986. When reactor number 4 exploded, it didn't just release a cloud of radioactive isotopes, it created an environment on Earth that was fundamentally incompatible with life. The radiation levels on the roof of the reactor and in the immediate vicinity were measured not in Röntgens but in thousands of Röntgen. It was a place where biology failed. The Soviet Union, faced with the greatest technological catastrophe in history, realized that human flesh and bone were too fragile for the task at hand. They needed armor, they needed steel. And so, the call went out. From every corner of the Soviet Union, heavy machinery was mobilized. It was the largest movement of engineering equipment since the Second World War, but this was a different kind of war. The enemy was invisible, silent, and capable of penetrating the thickest armor. The first wave of the assault came from the air. The pilots of the Mate and massive Mi-26 helicopters were the first to look directly into the open mouth of the reactor. Their mission was desperate: drop sand, boron, and lead directly into the burning core to stop the nuclear reaction. This was flying at its most dangerous. The air above the reactor was ionized, creating a column of radioactive heat that could stall engines and fry avionics. These helicopters were not designed for nuclear warfare. They were standard transport machines. To protect the pilots, crude modifications were made on the fly. Sheets of lead were stripped from wherever they could be found and bolted to the floor of the cockpits. It was a primitive shield against a primitive force. These machines flew hundreds of sorties a day. The dust they flew through was not dirt, it was pulverized uranium and graphite. By the time their mission was over, the engines of these helicopters were so radioactive that they could not be serviced. The metal itself had changed at an atomic level. These helicopters, once the pride of the Soviet Air Force, were towed to a field and abandoned, becoming the first residents of the radioactive graveyard. But the war on the ground was even more brutal. The debris from the explosion, chunks of graphite from the reactor core littered the surrounding area. This debris was lethally hot. A human being trying to clear it with a shovel would receive a fatal dose in less than 60 seconds. The liquidators needed machines that could push, lift, and carry this death away. The standard bulldozer of the time was the Soviet-made DET-250, a rugged diesel-electric tractor. But in the zones of highest radiation, even these beasts struggled. The problem was not the mechanics, it was the operators. To solve this, the engineers turned to their military reserves. They brought in the IMR-2, built on the chassis of a T-72 battle tank. The IMR-2 was a combat engineering vehicle designed to operate in the wasteland of a nuclear war. It was fitted with a massive dozer blade and a hydraulic claw that could manipulate small objects with surprising precision. These tanks were sealed against chemical and biological agents, lined with lead, and equipped with filtration systems. They were the perfect weapon for this fight. They plowed through the red forest, knocking down trees that had turned ginger brown from radiation absorption. They pushed layers of contaminated topsoil into deep trenches. But even the IMR-2 had a weakness. The radiation was so intense that it began to degrade the hydraulic fluids and foggy the optical glass of the viewports. The machines kept working, but they were slowly dying. The greatest challenge, however, awaited on the roof of the adjacent reactor number 3. The explosion had thrown tons of highly radioactive graphite and fuel rods onto the roof. Before the sarcophagus, the giant concrete tomb, could be built over the destroyed reactor, this roof had to be cleared. The radiation levels here were astronomical, estimated at over 10,000 Röntgens per hour in some spots. It was a suicide mission for a human. So, the Soviet authorities looked to the pinnacle of technology, robotics. This was the moment for the machines to save humanity. They brought in the best the world had to offer. From Germany, they acquired a specialized police robot, jokingly named the Joker. It was a marvel of Western engineering, designed to handle hazardous materials. It was painted bright yellow, looking futuristic and capable against the gray backdrop of the destroyed plant. The plan was simple. The Joker would roll onto the roof, use its manipulator arms to grab the graphite blocks, and throw them back into the core. It was a perfect plan on paper, but there was a fatal calculation error. The Soviets, in their secrecy, had understated the radiation levels to the Germans. When the Joker was lowered onto the roof by a heavy-lift helicopter, it moved for only a few minutes. Then, it stopped. It died instantly. The intense gamma radiation had penetrated the robot's casing and scrambled its delicate silicon microchips. The electronics were literally fried by the invisible beams. The pride of German engineering became nothing more than a radioactive statue, stuck in the debris it was meant to clear. With Western technology failing, the Soviets turned to their own secret weapon, the lunar program. These were rovers designed to explore the surface of the moon. They were built to withstand the harsh cosmic radiation of space. Scientists at the Leningrad Institute hastily modified these moon rovers for the roof of Chernobyl. They stripped away the scientific instruments and replaced them with bulldozer blades. They hardened the circuits, replacing sensitive chips with robust old-school vacuum tubes and simple relays, which were much more resistant to gamma rays. These machines, known as the STR-1, were lowered onto the roof, and unlike the Joker, they moved, they worked. For days, these lunar rovers pushed the deadly debris, their 6 wheels grinding over the graphite. They were the unsung heroes of the cleanup, machines built for another world, fighting a battle to save this one. But even they had limits. The radiation eventually chewed through their wiring, and one by one, they ground to a halt when the machines failed. The commanders had no choice but to use biorobots, human soldiers dressed in lead suits, running onto the roof for 45 seconds at a time to throw one shovelful of waste. But the machines had bought them time. They had taken the brunt of the initial assault. Once the sarcophagus was sealed and the immediate danger was contained, the question remained, what to do with the army of machines? There were thousands of them. Trucks, fire engines, ambulances, tanks, helicopters and bulldozers. They were all soaked in radiation. You cannot wash radiation off like mud. It embeds itself into the metal structure. The iron atoms in the steel become activated. The paint becomes a carrier of dust particles. These vehicles were too dangerous to return to service, too dangerous to melt down for scrap, and too numerous to bury completely. So, they created Rassocha. A massive field in the exclusion zone was designated as the final resting place. The vehicles were driven or towed there and parked in neat rows. It was a military formation of the dead. For decades, this graveyard stood as a monument to the cleanup. It was a place of eerie beauty, a mechanical Pompeii. Nature slowly began to reclaim the site. Vines grew through the broken windows of the buses that had evacuated the citizens of Pripyat. Trees sprouted through the engine bays of the ZIL trucks. Rust ate away at the armor of the tanks. But the story of the graveyard has a darker chapter. In the chaotic years following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the security around the zone weakened. The graveyard, containing millions of tons of high-grade steel, became a target for looters. Desperate for money and ignoring the invisible danger, scavengers broke into the zone. They didn't care about the clicking of their Geiger counters. They stripped engines, gearboxes, and wiring from the radioactive vehicles. They cut off the helicopter rotors. They stole the aluminum siding. This radioactive metal was smuggled out of the zone and sold into the global scrap market. It is a terrifying thought that some of that steel could have been recycled into new cars, building materials, or consumer goods. The engines of the IMR-2 tanks, which had pushed the graphite of a nuclear core, might have ended up in a smelter in Europe or Asia. Today, if you look at satellite images of the Rassocha Graveyard, you will see something surprising. It is disappearing. The rows of trucks are gone. The helicopters are missing. The Ukrainian government has engaged in a massive effort to process and bury the remains, but many believe that much of it was simply stolen. The Joker robot, however, remains. It was too famous, and perhaps too cursed, to be stolen. It lies in a scrap heap, its yellow paint faded to white, a silent testament to the failure of high technology against the forces of nature. The radioactive graveyard serves as a stark reminder of the limits of human engineering. We built machines to move mountains, to fly above the clouds, and to explore the moon. But when we unleashed the power of the atom, our greatest creations were rendered useless. The silicon brains of our robots were scrambled, the hardened steel of our tanks was poisoned. In the end, it was a battle of attrition. The machines sacrificed themselves so that humanity could survive. They absorbed the neutrons and the gamma rays that would have killed millions. As we look at the rusting carcasses of these mechanical giants, we should not see them as junk. We should see them as monuments. The Mi-26 helicopter, the IMR-2 tank, the STR-1 lunar rover, they are the silent guardians that held the line. They are the only things on Earth that have looked directly into the face of a nuclear meltdown and stood their ground, even if only for a moment. Now, they sleep in the forest, slowly returning to the Earth that they tried to save. While the invisible fire within them continues to burn, a warning to future generations of the price of hubris. The graveyard is quiet now, but the Geiger counters still scream if you get too close. And they will continue to scream for thousands of years.